you for joining us today. I am Debra Meyerson. I am a stroke survivor, person with aphasia, formerly the professor of organizational behavior at Stanford, and co-founder of Stroke Onward.
And I'm Steve Zuckerman, Deb's partner for 35 years and her care partner for the last 11 years since her stroke. I had a first career in business and investing, have partly exited a second career in economic justice, and I'm also a co-founder of Stroke Onward.
My name is Debra Meyerson. In 2009, I began lectures at Stanford like this: confident, strong, and casual. I encourage students to explore topics like gender, race, diversity, and identity. My name is Debra Meyerson. In 2010, I had a severe stroke. It robbed me of all speech. I had to relearn how to make a sound, how to say my name. My words came slowly and difficult to understand. My name is Debra Meyerson. Who am I now? I am alive. For this, I'm grateful and lucky. Many things have changed. I live with disabilities. My right hand doesn't work. I walk with a limp. My speech is really difficult. But some things haven't changed. I cherish the same values, love the same family, work the same determination. Losing my old life is the hardest part of my stroke. Rebuilding my identity as a stroke survivor with disabilities is the hardest part of my recovery. My stroke took so much of me, and attendance, control, my career, and so much more. But to me, I was the same person. So I had to get my capabilities back. For 3 years, I worked my ass off, the hardest job I ever had. With all this work, I still didn't regain all my capabilities. I couldn't be a Stanford professor anymore. My aphasia didn't let me do the job. So 3 years after my stroke, I lost tenure. This was a huge blow. What do I do now? Who am I now? My identity crisis began.
And so while Deb was going through this traumatic time in the first 3 years, I, as her care partner, was going through my own journey. And I don't mean this slide to in any way suggest that these things that I'm going to describe were linear, that they happened in this order. It was circular. They all kind of came at you at different times. But really the first certainly was fear. When we were in the hospital and Deb was experiencing the stroke and we were told by the doctors that all the damage was done to the brain, but now we just had to wait to see how much damage had been done. All through a night, hourly tests, Deb's disabilities were getting greater and greater. Her speech was disappearing. Her use of her limbs was disappearing. We called it the slow fall off a cliff. And And we didn't know how bad it was going to be. And that clearly was the height of the fear. We had some other moments of fear. Deb had medical complications. We really didn't know if she was going to make it. So that was a big part of the experience. Once we got through that initial phase, it was really all about problem solving and figuring out what does she need, what care, where should she be, what are the treatments, learning, internet searching, and fortunately that sort of played to my natural personality. But I also was very I have an optimism, and I used to say to Deb from the very beginning, oh, someday we're going to look back on this and it'll be a 6-month blip. And then things didn't get better, so it was going to be a 1-year blip. And in some ways that optimism was helpful. It was kind of a healthy denial. It kept us focused on trying to help Deb get as much back as she could. Caregiver versus care partner was an important one for us. There's so much in the medical system that tended to try to put Deb into a position of to lose her agency, to sort of be somebody that everybody else was caring for. Even when Deb couldn't speak at all, she knew what was going on and she wanted to be a part of her own care. And by me really thinking about myself as a care partner, not a caregiver, it really invited her into that process. It also changed how I thought about my role. It wasn't just about me helping Deb through a problem she had. This was our journey together. I was very lucky that I had some friends who talked about self-care really early on, and the importance of my taking care of myself, because I'd be no good to Deb if I wasn't healthy. I chose to focus on a few things that for me made a difference. Get the sleep I needed, exercise almost every day. And I was lucky. Deb's mom, Marcia Meyerson, was able to come live with us for 6 months. That enabled me to go back to work, at least part-time. And that way I wasn't living it 24/7. So I had some diversion. And for me, that was really, really helpful. Single parenting really is just an example of one of the many ways roles change when someone in a family goes through a trauma like this. We had our youngest child, our daughter, was in 10th grade in high school, living at home. Deb and I had always shared responsibilities with Sarah, and now I had them all. And one, that was hard. Two, I was lucky Sarah was Sarah and very independent and didn't require a lot of my time. And it also created some time together that we might not have otherwise had. And we talk sometimes of noticing and appreciating silver linings. Sarah's an athlete too, and I was committed to fitness. So we got into a program together that we probably never would have done together. Clear purpose. I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I really kind of organized life to say my number one job was to support Deb. And again, I'll come back to that in just a second. Frustration, please don't interpret the slide to suggest that it took me 3 years to get frustrated. Lots of frustration in this process from the very beginning. Although I always recognized any frustration I had could not come close to the frustration that Deb would be having. That said, it was frustration nonetheless. And one of the things that did come up about 3 years after the stroke was when I really just felt like I could not do anything right. You know, I'd run to open a door for Deb and she'd get mad at me because, you know, what do you think, I can't be independent and open the door for myself? But she'd be trying to close the car door and couldn't reach it. And it would be, what, you're sitting in the driver's seat and not helping me? You think I don't have disabilities? And that kind of led to what I now call the 6 magic words, which was, would you like me to help? And for any care partners that may be listening to this, that really was an important change. And I kind of feel silly it took me 3 years to get there. I mentioned purpose, and a little ways into Deb's recovery, we stumbled upon a graphic. This is my hand-drawn version of it. You'll all be glad to know I have no aspirations in art. But this was developed by a clinical psychologist, Susan Silk, who was going through her own crisis. She was going through cancer. And as she experienced people trying to help her and some people not being as helpful as she would like, We developed this ring theory, which says the person who experienced the trauma is right there in the middle. And then the people closest to that person are in the second ring, and then you can draw rings further out. And what she said is, wherever you are in the circle, your job is to really support and help when you're looking in, and to ask for help, or if you need to vent to people who are outside of you in the ring. And that was really helpful for me, both to focus my energy on supporting Deb, but even more to realize that I didn't have to support everybody in my life that was outside of me in that ring, that when people were trying to help in ways that weren't helpful, I had to say, that's really not helpful. And as a natural people pleaser, that was hard for me, which is why stumbling across Susan's ring theory was so helpful to me. So I'm going to pass it back to Deb, but that's a little bit for the care partners out there, what was going on for me in those first 3 years.
After I lost my job at Stanford, I really struggled. I didn't know what to do. I felt lost. I still felt like an academic. I wanted to be an academic that I was called I can't be. It's bad news. I was still holding on my old identity. So I looked at the past work. It was painful. The good news, I looked at the gun and the book I wrote in 2001, Tempered Radicals. Identity was a big part of the story. I thought about writing another book. First academic thing I did 4 years after my stroke was the gathering of trusted colleagues. The May meeting. At the meeting, we gathered to explore why we do the work that you do. I was struggling with my identity. I wanted to write the book about identity and stroke, but could I write the book? That I knew it is a lot of work. That I got it before, but could I do it again with aphasia? I don't think so. I was apprehensive. My speech was really limited, but I still shared my ideas with my colleagues. They were so supportive. They pushed my thinking. They helped me search for meaning now, even with disabilities, even losing my job at Stanford. The meeting is the deep dive into what's essential, what you care about most. They help me focus on that. My colleagues believed in me. They encouraged me to write this book. Writing identity theft became my learning journey. It took me 5 years, and I learned to accept lots of help. I learned most survivors were not told about the identity journey was so important to their recovery. And I learned firsthand that it's so important. The book is not just my story. With help, I interviewed more than 55 people. There's ages, backgrounds, shapes, and experience of life and stroke. And many healthy friends help me. The book is helped them. They struggled with the concept of losing.
Keep going.
Losing the loved ones, health issues, growing older, and navigating others' life changes.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the writing of the book, not the book itself. Deciding to write a book is obviously one thing, and actually writing it with severe aphasia is a very different thing. And Deb mentioned this. One thing that hadn't changed for her was her determination. So when she decided to write a book, what did she do? She sat down and started to write a book. Quickly, she realized that was going to be pretty tough. So she looked for the nearest, cheapest help she could find, and that was me. And for several months, we worked on trying to figure out what the book might say, what she really wanted to say, and how we could get it written. But we realized that I had a full-time job. Writing wasn't my profession. We really needed more help, and we were lucky to find a woman named Sally Collings, who was an author herself, an editor, a ghostwriter, and she signed on to this project and really worked shoulder to shoulder with Deb for about 18 months. We would talk about what we wanted to create. They would do the interviews together. She would help transcribe the interviews, code the interviews, and do a lot of the drafting that Deb and I could then work with. We were super excited because she was about to deliver us the first kind of final draft of the book. We were actually going out of town with our oldest son, Danny, and we were thinking we'd all read it and make a few tweaks and off to the publisher. And there was a lot of great stuff in that draft, but it didn't really have the message that she wanted to say, that Deb wanted to share with the world. And Danny, fortunately, was in between jobs. He agreed to kind of step in and be Deb's primary partner. Danny is the named co-author on the book. He really helped drive it from that first draft to help us get it to the book that it is today. And I think that story we share because it really is so fundamental to the adaptation that living with disabilities requires. That Deb could do something she wanted to do, write a book, but it had to be done very differently than she would have done it before her stroke. Deb also talked about interviewing a lot of different survivors and the diversity in the book. I'm not going to go through each of these individual stories, but there were very, very diverse experiences in the survivors that we interviewed to really create the material for the book. Mark lived in St. Louis. He was 58 when he had his stroke. He fortunately recovered enough to go back to his job as an accountant. Trish, the second person pictured there, was a project manager for Apple. She had a stroke at 43. She has severe aphasia like Deb. She decided to move to Florida, where she felt she could live a less expensive life, use her resources more, and she has gotten extremely involved in the aphasia community, doing advocacy for people with aphasia. And Manny on the right was 29 when he had his stroke. And you're probably getting a theme here. Strokes are not just old people who have strokes. He was a network engineer in San Jose, California. He talked a lot. He's Filipino. He talked a lot about the cultural issues around being Filipino and the expectation of a man in that culture, and how hard it was for him and for his mother for him not to be the strong provider that he was before his stroke. He also talked a lot about how he struggled with how to be a parent when he was in a wheelchair and couldn't do the things that he thought of as what parents are supposed to do, and told just a beautiful story about how his whole belief in what it is to be a good parent changed when his daughter came home one day and said, Dad, I've decided to change my focus and I'm going to go to school to be a physical therapist. And it really grew out of the compassion that she developed watching her father go through what he was going through. So very, very different experiences, diverse experiences of life and of stroke, but also some striking similarities. Everyone we talked to worked incredibly hard, like Deb, to regain all the capabilities they could. And they did so for years, not just for months or a year. And so we're big believers in trying to break the stereotype that most of the recovery happens in the first 6 to 12 months. So it's not worth working on it after that. Clearly, the progress slows down, but there was still great progress. Deb's still doing therapy and improving 11 years after her stroke. And maybe most powerful for us was that none of the people we talked to were offered any significant help or guidance around their emotional journey after stroke. That those issues of just regaining a rewarding life in the face of what's happened was not part of the caregiving process. And that really is what drove kind of our path from that point forward. So chapter 9 is entitled Stroke is a Family Illness. And that's something that so many of the people we talked to talked about, which is a stroke doesn't just affect the person who has it. It affects everybody close to them, around them, particularly the family. And what we really came to believe is that it doesn't just affect the lives of other family members. It actually affects who we are. It affects our identity as well. If you care to read Identity Theft and are up for a good cry, feel free to go straight to chapter 9, which starts with the story of our daughter, who was 15 when Deb had her stroke, and when she was 17, just starting her final year of high school, she gave a talk to her entire school, small school, but the whole school population. And we went and we didn't know what she was going to talk about. And she started talking about her experience of Deb's stroke. And in particular, how at the beginning, she really wanted to be strong. She's an athlete. She had had a role model who was a very strong, independent woman. And she kept telling herself, I don't need help. I can do this. I can gut this out. And then she started seeing Deb accepting help out of necessity. Powerful that was, and how much Deb got from the help, and how that didn't in any way suggest Deb was weak. She just needed help. And she started letting her friends in, and she felt the power of that support. She ultimately ended her talk saying, even the strongest person in the world needs a spotter. And it really changed her view of what strength means. And that changed her as a person in a very, very meaningful way. Needless to say, Deb and I went through a couple boxes of tissues listening to that talk. Something else that features very prominently in the book is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And anybody who's taken an entry-level psych course probably knows this. And this wasn't developed for stroke survivors or for people with disabilities. This was back in the 40s, a psychologist who realized that what motivates people changes based on what they have, and that people need to have their basic needs met, and they really can't think about higher level needs until those needs are met. But when those needs are met, they can start to think about their psychological needs, and then their self-fulfillment needs, how they can really live the most fulfilling life they can, and have the most purpose in life as they can. And what Deb realized was that, after her stroke, she was knocked right down to the bottom of this pyramid. But that once she started to regain her health and started to have safety and not need as much help to survive, she too could climb back onto the pyramid and start thinking about how to build a life that meets these higher level needs. And I think that's really been what our journey has been all about, and what we're trying to find ways to help other people do as well. When we first started giving talks about the book, I realized that really the book writing journey was very much a reflection of Deb's journey. She started, as she said, to really prove she could. She was still an academic, and writing books is what academics do. But very quickly, it became her own emotional journey that was critical to her recovery. And that really is what drove her through most of the book writing process. But there were times when she was ready to throw in the towel. I often say that it was an incredibly brave thing to take on a project that put in front of your most frustrating disability every day. She'd wake up in the morning and she was working on something that required communication, and her aphasia was her most frustrating disability. Yeah. And there were a couple times when she came down the stairs and said, "I'm done. I don't care. This thing can never hit the shelves. You know, we'll give back the advance we got. I'm not writing this book." And what got her through those difficult moments was really that she had realized this book could help others. And that really drives a lot of what people talk about all the time, is wanting to have a purpose that it goes beyond oneself. And so that journey in writing the book really reflected the journey that she and we have been on ever since the stroke. So Deb mentioned earlier that understanding identity was at the core of her journey. And we talked about the fact she had to give up her faculty position, but that doesn't mean she's given up liking to teach and be Professor Deb. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Deb.
Before I talk about identities, I want to share the process of preparing for the talk like this. I have so much to share. It's really difficult. For me, the hardest part about aphasia is struggling to say what I want to say. To be clear, we write the content. Steve helps. I practice for hours. Even then, I can't say all I want to say. It's so different before my stroke. Steve shares more complicated materials. I'm so glad he can, but I met him a lot when we worked together. I know it's not mad at him, but mad at my situation. This is life now, but I won't let my aphasia seal my voice. So here I go. Let's talk about identities. We all have multiple identities. I had to remember that I am more than a job at Stanford. I'm a mother, wife, daughter, friend, and teacher. I love skiing, biking, walking, sailing. I had to think about all the things that makes me me. Identities change. We are changing all the time. Right before my stroke, I was not the same person I was 4 years before or 10 years before. My stroke changed me faster, but I am changing anyway. Identity is the social construct. We are who we are and the context of relationships. My friends, family, and colleagues are the big part of making me who I am. Some people are shaped with religion, groups, neighborhoods, volunteer organizations, and they're involved with. Most important, identity is the choice. Instead of asking who I am now, ask who I want to be now. Sense of self. Your identity is strongly affected by your situation, gender, race, social status, and more.
So it turns out 5 years of work in publishing a book wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Deb and I realized that there was so much work to be done to help people realize that this emotional journey, that rebuilding identity was critical to the recovery process. That recovery didn't just mean rehabilitation, it meant rebuilding your identity, rebuilding rewarding lives. We started Stroke Onward just as the book was coming out to do that. And I won't spend a lot of time here. Our mission, which is up on the screen, to ensure stroke survivors and their supporters, families, friends, have the resources needed to rebuild identity and rewarding lives. We think of it as we've got a vision for a different stroke care system, one that fully supports every survivor's emotional journey in recovery. And it's our hope that our work contributes in some small ways to driving the system so that a stroke survivor and their family 10 years from now experiences a very different process than we and the people we've interviewed have experienced. Building on Maslow's pyramid, we created our pyramid of impact. And what we're trying to do in our work is help people directly, create resources and do things. Hopefully this video helps the people who watch it. So we're trying to create direct impact. We're also trying to partner with organizations that are also in the field of supporting stroke survivors and survivors of other traumas, so that whatever we do can be distributed through a larger network so that they can help more people. And ultimately, as we said, we hope to help change the system, because that's when hundreds of thousands or millions of people have a better experience. In terms of how we are doing the work we're doing, we've really put it into 3 buckets. Raising awareness, just because what we found was a void, we felt it was important to just make sure people hear that this is important for stroke survivors and their families. And maybe the most significant thing we're doing there is we're writing a column for the American Stroke Association every other month. That's got much greater reach than what we've developed on our own. But we're talking about it when we can. We're writing about it when we can to bring it into people's awareness. Second part of our strategy is to create and share resources. One of the big things we've done there is that one of our colleagues, Jody Kravitz, led the process of creating discussion guides for the book Identity Theft, so that groups could get together, whether they be stroke support groups or aphasia support groups or groups of care partners or groups of professionals or just people. As Deb mentioned, a lot of people who haven't had a stroke find this message important to rebuilding their identity in the face of change. And so for free on our website, We have materials that people can download to get into this work in a deeper way. And one thing I'll mention is that, and this was critical to Deb, from the very beginning, we insisted with the publisher that there be an audiobook version, because for a lot of the people we're trying to help, stroke survivors, reading is difficult. And we're finding that people will often listen to the book while they read the book. And we've also created some summary materials. So for people for whom even listening to the book isn't accessible, there are summary versions, both written and audio. And then the third part of our work really is trying to find ways explicitly to work at changing the healthcare system. And two things that we're working on there. One is around curriculum. We're working with a lot of academic therapists who are teaching the next generation of speech therapists, occupational therapists, to build some of this material into their curriculum. We're also talking a lot with people in the mental health profession who really have a lot of the training and skills to provide guidance on these issues, but there aren't very many engaged in the stroke care system. And so we're working on seeing if that's something we can change. So I'm going to stop talking about our work at Stroke Onward now. It's grounded in our personal experience and the personal experience of other stroke survivors and their families. And so I'm going to pass it back to Deb to kind of take us home.
People ask me what helps me most. These help me a lot. Look forward, but take time to accept my loss. Focus on small wins. They add up. They help me rebuild. Recovery means focusing on the most important things in life, not regaining my old life. Seek opportunities for growth. Focus on meaning and purpose. Appreciate the support in my life. My husband, friends, but good family. For some, it's religion. Whatever helps you most. And the most important thing in anything, really realizing the emotional journey, rebuilding identity is so important. My journey is full of challenges. I'm building a different kind of career. I have new limits, but I'm again an active mother, partner, and athlete. I am still rebuilding my identity and rebuilding my life. So how am I now? I'm a stroke survivor. But I got frustrated more than used to be, but I'm lucky to be alive. I have great support, and I have purpose and meaning again. To be clear, we have not figured it out. We are still on the journey, and we are going to be for life. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you found this useful. And please visit our website at www.strokeonward.org. Thanks.